Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Avatar weekly discussion topic. This video is going to be some further thoughts on the Korra comics coming out in 2016, and I suppose more or less a kind of, will 2016 be a better year for the Avatar fandom than 2015 was? That's kind of what the gist of the video is going to be, but it's going to be very focused on the Korra comics more than anything. Before I get into that though, there's a quick bit of news I want to cover here that I don't think is really worth devoting a whole news video to because it's relatively small. So up on screen here you can see this image of this Aang statue figurine. This was revealed in the Dark Horse solicitations for April. This figure is coming out June 22nd, 2016. It's going to retail for $79.99 and it is 8 1/4 inches tall. Now, we have seen this before in grey prototype form at one of the conventions last year, but now we're seeing it in full colour. We're seeing the release date and stuff like that. This is the third statue that Dark Horse are going to be releasing. I think they have a Korra statue coming out potentially the end of this month, start of next month. I don't really keep up with the statues all that much, but it's the Korra one's coming soon. We've had the Aang statue from Korra. Kind of hard to fully explain that in just words. You know, the statue of Aang that's in Korra has been made in statue form. That was the first one they put out, but now they're doing it like ATLA Aang, which we have here. So that's it's nice that they're doing that. They have the two main characters now, and a notable kind of thing to start off the statues with the Aang statue. But let's talk about how this looks. I think overall the sculpt is quite good. You know, Aang standing on a rock, you know, holding his glider. His clothes in general look quite good. The detail seems good. My problem is with the face. I think the face is a little off. I don't like how high the eyebrows are above his eyes, and the expression on his face, specifically his mouth, the kind of closed mouth smile, I don't think was the correct move for this statue. I don't think that represents Aang like it perhaps should. It seems a little weird to me. Just like if you look at this statue close enough, that face, just there's something off with it, and I can't fully put my finger on like the exact details of like what exactly is the problem, but I think it's something about the eyebrows. It's something about the mouth and the type of smile that Aang has that just doesn't quite work for the kind of pose and what they're going for here. Another part of it is I think that like in general I prefer Aang's look in book 3, but I get why they're going for the classic Aang look, but you know, as I said before, the statues aren't really my thing. I get that some people really like them, but for me they're just too expensive, too big, and I just feel that Dark Horse are kind of wrong in terms of focusing on this sort of a high-end kind of piece rather than trying to put out like smaller kind of figures of these characters at cheaper prices that would get more people buying them because they know that they're going to come out a bit quicker. Each individual one's going to be cheaper, and you're going to get a good selection of characters. Right now we're in the position where like it's been like 3 years since these statues have been coming out, and we've only got 2 characters covered in them. And it's why our industries are also making statues. But again, they've done a Lin, and now they have a Korra coming. Like it's just that we're not seeing enough variety of characters here, and I think for me, like I'd want more kind of Disney Infinity sized figures type things for Avatar. That's what I'm looking for. I don't need these huge figures. I would like a physical representation of all of the Avatar characters, but I think the kind of smaller figurine style would be much better than these 8 1/4 inches statues that are like very specific pose. You're spending a lot of money on them and they're quite big, so they don't suit everyone. I have some slight problems with the sculpt, but yeah, I'm sure for some people it'll be something they're really looking forward to. But let's get into the majority of this video, which is talking about 2016 and how it will be slightly different than 2015, and how the Korra comics being the main new thing from last year, will that really change things for the fandom? I think in general, like last year was better than I think a lot of people would expect, kind of looking back on it. We got a good deal of a good deal of comics. Smoke and Shadow Part 1, 2, Rift Part 3, Rift hardcover, Avatar Legacy, the Ty Lee free comic. We got a complete ATLA collection DVD set released, and the last few bits of Korra, Korra Book 4 art book, Korra Book 4 DVD in more regions, and a couple of regions got a complete DVD Blu-ray set. So, last year was the tail end of Korra merchandise, coinciding with the end of the show, plus some pretty interesting comics and stuff like that. But overall, it was okay, we're just it was just kind of the same as we've had in previous years, just now without Korra. So there wasn't anything that was full on brand new this year that was going to really make us excited. 2016, on the other hand, is going to be very similar in that, we're getting Smoke and Shadow Part 3. We expect the next Avatar comic series to also start sometime next year, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. But the new thing that we know is coming are the Korra comics. They were announced last year. We got some information about them, but they are coming out starting fall 2016, and the Avatar free comic this year is going to be a Korra free comic. So you could see what they're really putting a lot of their effort into Avatar wise next year, that the Korra comics and starting them off is their big thing for next year. And I think it could be something that does get the fandom a bit more excited in another off year for the Avatar fandom with no new show. The problem with the Avatar comics up to now has been that there's always just been a massive part of the fandom that just does not in any way care about the comics because they're comics, and they just aren't going to read them because of that. And that's to be expected. I personally think they're good enough that basically every fan should be reading them, but obviously it's never going to be the case that the whole fandom reads all the comics. So there's that, and then there's obviously a group of people who've tried the comics and just don't like them. I think Smoke and Shadow last year, and obviously it's going to end start of this year, has been a slight change in that I think much more people are really into this series and liking it, and are really eager to see how it ends, and it's definitely got people talking a lot more. Very similar to The Search in that sense. It really got people into the comics and talking about it. So that was good, but it still wasn't that many more people than usual for the comics. The Korra comics, given that Korra hasn't been over for that long in the grand scheme of things, and when the comics do come out, it'll be just under 2 years since Korra ended. I think we're close enough to Korra that a lot of people will see the release of these comics and be like, oh, they're continuing the show in the comics, and really pick up and get into it. There is a problem though, in the sense of that, a lot of people just don't like the Avatar comics and the direction they're taking. A lot of people have that perspective already just with how Korra the show ended. A lot of people are so put off future Korra story content just because of how Book 4 of Korra came to an end, with the whole Korra Sami happening quite quickly and not really much explanation for it and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of people going into this comic knowing that it's going to be somewhat Korra Sami focused, that just instantly is I'm not reading this comic for them. For me, even though I feel similarly about Korra Sami in the sense of I think it was set up quite poorly, and the creators I think know that, even that they've, as much as they've defended it in some posts that I think were misguided, and at the same time they've also said in other statements and interviews that they weren't aware up until the last couple of episodes and they decided that this is how we want to end the show. They weren't aware that Nick were actually fairly okay with them hinting at Korra and Asami getting together. So if they'd brought it forward quicker, that this is the direction they wanted to go in, they would have been allowed to do more setup for that relationship. So as much as they can criticize us for oh, you just didn't see it, you weren't watching the show correctly, I do feel that the relationship should have been set up better, and it is a flaw, I think, with the show that they gave Korra the final scene of The Legend of Korra, and it having such little setup. But I'm excited about the Korra comics because they have the potential to now establish why these two are a couple. Have those two talk now as a couple about their feelings for each other, how they came together, and develop that perfectly. I'm open. I have criticisms of the Korra-sama relationship and how it came together in the show, but I'm open to seeing what the Korra comics do with it, and I'm actually really excited. But not everyone feels the same way that I do. A lot of people have similar criticisms, but are like, no, they just messed it up here. I don't care what they're planning on doing with it. If this is going to be Korra-sama focused, I have no interest in looking at these comics. And that's going to be a hard thing for them to in any way get over, because you've straight away announced them effectively as Korra-sama comics more than anything else. Whereas I think a lot of people want them more to be like... the problems with the end of Korra were not just Korra-sama. Like, a lot of the minor characters really got a bad run of things towards the end. Like, Jinora was barely used in book 4. I think there's some stuff that you can do with a lot of the other characters that you need to do, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff to resolve plot-wise in Korra comics that I think is important for them to get the balance right. Yes, some focus will have to be on Korra-sama, but you also have to realize that not everyone is going to be a fan of this relationship. That you didn't do it the best in the show to set it up and get everyone excited for Korra-sama comics. So you have to make that ship good without it overpowering the entire comic, because some people actually just want to read these comics for the continuation of the plot. What's going to happen with Kavira, Batar? Are they going to get put in jail, put on trial? What happens with like Jinora and Kai? We didn't get like anything with their relationship in book 4. Korra and Bolin didn't get a final scene together at the end of book 4 either, and stuff like that. There's a lot of little things here or there. The most important, I think, plot-wise, is that they absolutely left this huge rift between humans and spirits at the end wide open, that just like Korra needs to resolve things with the spirits going forward, and so that's another thing. So they have to get this right, and I suppose that's why they've left it a decent bit after Korra came to an end to even approach doing Korra comics, because they have to plan this out effectively. Because too much Korra-sama and you'll turn a pretty big audience off the comics, too little Korra-sama and you won't have the hardcore Korra-sama shippers wanting to buy the book because they feel like the ship isn't getting enough attention. Don't focus on the plot too much. If the plot is bad at the expense for the whole point of Korra-sama getting more attention, that's going to turn a lot of other people off. So they have to get this right. Like, if they do get it perfectly right, it could be the kind of shot in the arm that the fandom really needs to kind of get back in full force and get talking again about stuff. Because the Avatar comics that are released right now, they get people talking for like the week of release and a little bit afterwards, and then further speculation once they start releasing news about the next part. But for the most part, the like 4-month gap between each Avatar comic is always a fairly just barren period where like no one's really talking that much about each book. Korra comics, I think, have the potential to really get people talking for a long time, speculating about what's coming next. But I think most importantly what they need to do is realize that the problem isn't really the quality of the comics, it's the schedule of the comics. That is kind of what's killing the fandom. That it's 4 months between every issue, and then each series is like 6 months between that. We're going into 2016 now. We're going to get the final part of Smoke and Shadow. We're going to get that in at the end of March. I assume sometime around, July, August, we're going to get the Smoke and Shadow Library Edition. And then they have to, I think, announce what the next Avatar comic series is, and have at least the first part come out in 2016 as well. I think this has to be the case, because if it's just the case that the Korra comic is taking the place of where the other Avatar comic would usually be, we're basically in the same position. It's just now a Korra comic. I want to see the Avatar and Korra comics being released kind of side by side, not the same day as each other. I think what you need to do is that, okay, they're both probably going to have the same schedule of like each creative team, Gene Yang and Gurihuru for the Avatar comics, Mike DiMartino and Brittany Williams for the Korra comics. Both of those teams are probably going to have a very similar schedule of Part 1 comes out 4 months, Part 2 comes out 4 months, Part 3 comes out. But if you're releasing them both side by side, you can do something interesting, like, say, we know the first Korra comic is coming out fall 2016. Based on the lack of information we've heard about it, I'm assuming kind of late fall 2016, so like October, November time, possibly December. So I would assume that perhaps once they announce the next Avatar comic, it's probably coming like August or September. Probably September is actually realistically when it probably will be. So they say, I think a good schedule would be next Avatar comic focusing on Katara and Sokka returning to the Southern Water Tribe in September. 2 months, then in September, October, November, I assume, you have Korra comic Part 1. 2 months later, you're into 2017 now, you have Avatar comic Part 2. 2 months later, Korra comic Part 2, and so on. You now have a 2-month gap between each comic. Still 4 months between each part of an individual series, but it's only 2 months between each actual release of an Avatar comic book. That would really get people excited, I think, throughout the year, because it's a case of, like, given the schedule of how things end up playing out, you get the first part, and then like a week or two later you probably have the preview for the next comic. Then you could talk about that, and then by the time you're finished talking about that, the next comic is out. Then you're straight away into the next preview, the next comic, and stuff like that. And that's the kind of style of things that they need to have, that just to keep the fandom active throughout the year, you have to have a better release schedule. As it is now, not much information about Korra comics. We know there is another Avatar comic coming, and we assume it's about Katara and Sokka returning to the Southern Water Tribe, but it hasn't been officially announced yet. There's been no full details on when exactly it's coming. That almost leads me to believe that, okay, so they're both coming out at basically the same time then. And I think that sounds cool, like, okay, they're going to release Part 1 of Korra comic and Part 1 of the Avatar comic on the same day, but it's a case of just like, okay, so then you get the book in the day, and instead of spending 20 minutes reading one, you spend 20 minutes and read both. You spend like half an hour and read both, or something like that. It's still, you're going to discuss them for the same time, and they're almost like wasting potential by having them both come out in the same day. It's a weird situation if they do it that way. But the key thing going forward now, that we haven't finished Smoke and Shadow just yet, it's coming out in a couple of months. They need to obviously get that out, get the hardcover out for Smoke and Shadow, but very quickly, very soon now, like I assume in the next couple of weeks, they have to reveal covers for the first Korra comic, and at the very least, announce the next Avatar comic. They need to do that sooner rather than later, and I really think, I think it's going to be a big disappointment for me if the next Avatar comic is announced and it's for 2017. That will be a big disappointment for me. I, at the very least, want the first part to be coming out this year, just so we can have sort of that schedule that I talked about. Avatar Korra to release them and not have such a break between each issue. So there's that, and then, as I said, there's other stuff like the free Korra comic coming out this year in May. That should be fun and get people excited to see how Korra as a series works in comic form. Even if it's just going to be a small story, that should be exciting. And then there are other things coming out this year other than just Korra comics. As I said, there's going to be some statues released this year. There is, of course, the potential that they release the Korra complete Blu-ray collection that came out, I think, in Australia, that coming out for like America and stuff like that. That collection would be nice to see. There's always the hope that the rest of the Korra soundtrack and potentially an Avatar soundtrack comes out, though it really doesn't look likely. If you follow Jeremy Zuckerman on Twitter, he seems to get very frustrated every time he kind of tries to make something happen and then it doesn't happen. So don't really know about that. Wouldn't really get my hopes up for that, absolutely. But there's other stuff as well, like there's the potential for, we got the Avatar poster collection last year. We could get the Korra poster collection this year, and there's much more like official Korra posters out there already. Like there's the ones for Coronation, the ones that they did for like every convention during the run of Korra. So that would be an amazing book to come out, and it would like basically create itself because there's already so many like official posters out. So I'd really like to see that at some point, the Korra poster collection. It seems like such an obvious thing to do, but you know, that seems to be about it. Like 2016 could be a better year than 2015. It also could be a worse year, depending on how the quality of the Korra comics. As I said, most importantly, I think depending on what the schedule of the comics coming out is going to actually be, that's the key thing. So, yeah, I suppose that's going to be the end of the discussion. I don't want to go on too much longer. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on going as we're in 2016 now. What do you think this year is going to be like for us as Avatar fans? And especially about the comics. Like, what do you think they're going to do with the scheduling for everything? When is the next Avatar comic going to be announced? And do you think they're really thinking in any way, I suppose, about really spacing things out so that there's not that much of a wait for us and stuff like that? So that has been the discussion video for this week. In the comments, again, also let me know if there's a topic that you want me to talk about in a future one of these videos, because otherwise I just come up with a random one like this every week. So that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.